Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video we're going to be taking a look at Cassie Lang. I'm going to be breaking down her abilities, explaining her rotation, showing her general playstyle, some of her favorable matchups, and so forth. Now I have had Cassie Lang for a while, which is actually a very good thing because Cassie Lang is a champion that does require quite a bit of practice. I'm not going to say that she is as hard or skill intensive to use as Tigra, but it is very similar, at least to me, because it's always matchup dependent. You need to know which special attacks you should face, which you shouldn't. You need quite a bit of practice, keeping an eye on how many PIM charges she has, for how long she can shrink, so on and so forth. So she is not a champion that you can just kind of pick up and, go pew pew. You definitely will, struggle, be frustrated with her initially until you get kind of more confident with her. That is not to say that at this moment I feel like I'm amazing with her, but definitely I have noticed a significant improvement over time in my ability to use her. So I think that is quite important to point out. And I didn't want to make this guide earlier also, well, because I wanted to wait whilst more people have access to Cassie Lang. So first of all, let's go, as always, in the ability breakdown. So the positives of Cassie Lang are, well, they're quite extensive. I'm not going to list all of them, but most importantly, her buff, poison, and shock immunity, as well as immunity to power steal if she's awakened. Oh, these, obviously, the most important ones are the poison immunity and the buff immunity in itself, because that automatically makes her quite good counter immune to Mystic Dispersion, plenty of annoying nodes like Power Snack or Buffet, so on and so forth. So yes, buff immunity is still quite rare. There's only like 5-6 champions in a game with that, and it is a huge upside. Any champion coming in the game with buff immunity immediately gets kind of like a, my attention at the very least, because just by virtue of being immune to buffs, you shut down a lot of nodes and a lot of abilities, especially against Mystic champions. Now, another cool thing that I personally like is the fact that she has access to huge amounts of debuffs relatively quickly and easily, and that obviously synergizes with the Spare Mastery, that synergizes with a ton of different nodes in story content where, they are building them for Science Champions, and also the fact that it synergizes with Inequity makes her really tanky. Now, she does have basically average or slightly above average health pool, but in between Count, Maxed Inequity, it really feels like you hardly take any damage when you do make a mistake if you run properly. And I love that, because when you try things, if you're not super confident in the matchups, you might make a mistake, you might eat a combo, but in most cases, it will not hurt much. And I will demonstrate that a bit later in one of the gameplay clips where I do basically kind of like comparison of the damage taken. Moving on, she does have access to Miss on Demand, which gives her a quite versatile playstyle, giving you the ability to completely phase some special attacks if need be, especially if potentially they are fully unblockable. Now, it is something that's not infinite and indefinite, so you do need to keep an eye on it. But ultimately, she does have access to several different forms of damage as well, because obviously she has the Power Sting damage, and then she has guaranteed crits on level 2, which aren't by no means kind of like a vital bit of her overall damage, but it is nice kind of win more scenario where, if need be, she does have the guaranteed crits and also quite large hit damage. And obviously the fact that she does have access to poison, which in itself is not a large poison, but again, it just opens up several nodes and abilities and helps her out as well. It's always kind of like nice to have access to this damage over time debuff. And the cool thing is that you can still use her in poison immune matchups, as I will demonstrate in some of the fights later on as well. Now, negatives. She is AI dependent. Stingy AI can screw you up. Luckily, she does have access to Taunt, but still, even with Taunt, especially recently, AI can behave however they want, and then the fight can go sideways quite quickly, because her playstyle does involve timer watching, making sure that your power stings do not fall off, keeping an eye whether you have a Taunt active, keeping an eye whether you have that poison to extend the duration. But on the bright side with this, she is helped tremendously by Ant-Man Relic that can increase the duration of power stings, that gives you an additional access to taunt, therefore lessens the importance of spamming level 1s and kind of like makes it more reliable because you can double up on taunts and then they are even more effective. Now, she does have this ramp up and maintain playstyle, which means that if you do mess up, it's kind of like with, let's say, Invisible Woman. It is harder to maintain the Invisible Woman's damage, but the point is that if you do mess up, you might need to start your ramp up all over again. Now, on the bright side, she can ramp up relatively fast, but in kind of shorter to medium fights, if you do lose your ramp up, that obviously will significantly extend your fight time. It's not end of the world, you do not necessarily immediately get KO'd or something, but you would lose a lot of your damage. And also the fact that she does have a particular playstyle that does require you to have kind of like on-the-fly judgment calls when you can phase, when you can't, when you need to use your heavy attack, which special attack to go for. And she's definitely not a champion where, you know, you just enter the fight and drop a level 2 and job's done. Or, you know, like CGR, you know, parry heavy, full combo ending with light, full combo ending with medium, level 2, if need be, rinse and repeat. It's not that. She's completely different to play. You do need to be kind of like on it, consistently engaged and paying attention in the fight. Some neutral things that I do think are worth a while to point out. She does have 4th highest base crit rate in the game. So it is often worth to go for her level 2, even if you do not have the taunt active that would give you the guaranteed crits, because she's likely going to crit quite a lot anyhow. Her power stings are based on the base attack, which can be negative in some senses because she doesn't get increased damage, power sting damage from, let's say, recoil or boost and stuff like that. But it also can be positive because these power stings will ignore a lot of damage mitigation, weakness debuffs on her, so on and so forth, as evident in the previous Gladiator Circuit meta. She was extremely, extremely capable attacker in the last week because you could get 10 weaknesses on you and don't really care about it. Now, also, point to note, her SIG is needed for max damage potential as well as defensive utility. Majority of her defensive utility lies in her signature ability because it does give her a wade chance. The higher the SIG, the higher the wade chance, up to 9%. And then also lets her place power sting when she evades. It also increases max power stings you can place on opponent. But that is kind of her main defensive utility. Only other thing that makes her somewhat dangerous on defense is her level 1. Basically, fighting against her, you always want to push her to level 2. It's easy to avoid, and then you don't have any negative repercussions. If she throws level 1 whilst fighting against you, you're probably going to take damage because she's going to place those 14 charges on you, and you're unlikely to clear all of them in time. And also, kind of in a clear Kabam fashion, her animations currently are bugged to shit. And that's the truth. And a lot of things can go very, very wrong. And I'll explain them as they go along, but it's basically that there is too long of a break in between her heavy attack hits or level 1 hits. Level 1 often whiffs. And when she's throwing her heavy attack, if opponent has more than a bar of power, they actually have time to use a special attack. So I'm going to show that in a fight as well, where I start my heavy attack against the thing. I connect first hit of my heavy attack. Thing is getting hit by it. Before the second hit connects, thing just randomly uses special attack against me. And, you know, that can screw her over a lot. So, realistically speaking, she has been bugged since she came out, and it is quite bad. It is very, very noticeable, and it is just because her animation speed seems to be slightly bit too slow in between the hits, and some hitboxes aren't in the right place. I do hope Kabam addresses sooner than later because that makes her somewhat unreliable, and especially some more intricate matchups. Right, so let's jump to the gameplay. And let's take a look. So this is my own Cassie Lang. She's rank 4, has been rank 4 for a while. I have used her in Battlegrounds a fair amount as well, in other game modes too. And mine is at SIG 160, which is pretty much fine. I don't think she really needs that SIG 200. My evade chance is 8.32%. At max SIG, it would be 9.0%. And power stings I can have basically 9 extra power stings at max sig for another 40 signature levels. I could have additional 1 power sting. So I'm pretty much fine with her being at 160. I don't think I'm going to try to get her to 200, which is, I think this is where you ideally want her. But, you know, even if your signature level is lower, she still works just fine. Right, so first let's go over her basic rotation. And the base idea is all of her kit revolves around heavy attack and you forcing opponent to miss with that heavy attack. And every time opponent misses with that heavy attack, and the longer you charge that heavy attack, you can see you're going to be consuming your PIM particles, and you're going to be gaining dormant power stings. Now, when you connect your heavy attack to your opponent, first hit that connects inflicts power stings. So by charging my heavy attack, I'm inflicting more power stings here. Also, additionally, every time I would gain a buff, so every time I dex, or every time I miss opponent's special attack hit, you gain poison charges, basically. And then if you finish a combo with light attack, you can place a poison on your opponent, which extends the duration of your taunts and power stings, thus making her much easier to manage. And it's very, very, very useful. Here you can see that I pretty much immediately went for level 2. Nice amount of damage with the guaranteed crits while taunt is active. As I mentioned, you don't need to have that taunt and you'll still be doing decent damage with level 2, but if you have active taunt, you will be gaining guaranteed crits. Also, damage on level 2 depends on the amount of power stings you have on your opponent. And here we can see, maintain the taunt and just push opponents past 1 bar of power, and the fight is pretty much golden. You don't have too much to worry about there. I'm at the max amount of power stings that I can have, and Winter Soldier is down in 1 minute 28. So again, to break down a few additional things here. Again, so you can see that currency she has at 300, which is max, is how long you can kind of shrink yourself down with your heavy attack. The longer you have shrunk down, and the more attacks your opponent misses, the more dormant power stings you gain. We can see that here is 7, 8, 9. 7, 8, 9, and then I activate my heavy attack, and those dormant power stings convert to active power sting debuffs. You do have to connect your heavy attack. If you don't, opponent will have no power stings inflicted upon him, and that is the entire base of her kit. So charging heavy attack, forcing opponent to miss is the most important thing. You want to be very careful never to let your PIM particles fall to 0, because then you will passively stun yourself. Now you can also see those 3 charges I have. Now I have 5 of them. In order to use those, you finish a combo with light attack and you inflict poison debuff on the opponent. Max charges you can gain is 6, and the more charges you have at the time you do finish a combo with light attack, the longer the poison lasts. Additionally, level 1 gives opponent increased power if they are under 1 bar of power. So basically, if you use a level 1 against opponent, it is almost guaranteed, or pretty much guaranteed, that you will push opponent past 1 bar of power for them to use a special attack and take damage. And the cool thing with her is that, yeah, you can do 4 hit combos and immediately go charging your heavy attack and basically just drop them down with the heavy attack, inflict more power stings. That is kind of what you often want to do, as we can see here. As we saw before, when you can just drop a 4 or 5 hit combo in your opponent, start charging your heavy attack, force opponent to miss, drop a heavy attack, push them past bar of power, everything's awesome. Now we can see a nice casual 100k level 2 again, because I do have pretty much my full ramp up, and he takes 50k power sting damage. So class disadvantage, 1 minute 28, not too bad. Winter Soldier fight. Now, how quickly she can do with kind of Balgan's level health pools. Well, let's take a look at that. So again, I go for a full combo here. You do want to push your opponent in their corner, ideally as quickly as you want, as quickly as you can. Now I start charging my heavy attack here. I only get 5 power stings this time around. Now I get him to miss a few more hits. He's at 12 power stings, which is perfectly fine. And this is where also Ant-Man really comes in, because I got my taunt on the opponent even before I used my level 1, which just makes it so much safer to use Cassie Lang. And here again, we're just placing, ever so few more power stings on the opponent. pushing him past 1 bar of power. He has 19 power stings, bait out that, and I'm just going to use my level 2 to finish off the fight. Simple, straightforward. So, smaller Balgron's health pool done in 44 seconds. Let's go against slightly larger one. This is 200k health pool, and the fight will more or less last the same. The kind of trickiest part and most crucial part is the initial ramp up. You want to make sure that you do not waste your PIM charges at the beginning of the fight. Later on, it doesn't typically matter too much once you have gotten plenty of power stings, but at the beginning, you definitely want to make sure that you use those charges and put the power stings on the opponent. Here we can see that I used my heavy attack to phase opponent's special attack, so I gained 3 charges, placed poison, making sure that my power stings last longer. There again, I charged my heavy attack, got my opponent to miss a couple more times. He has 18 power stings on him at this moment. I'm going to finish a combo with light to place a very short poison because he only had 1 charge, but still, that's quite helpful. Unfortunately, Taunt just expired, but as I said, she does have a decent crit rate. We can see that 2 hits there, crit for 15k already, and I basically just need to make sure that that Duck uses special attack, and as soon as he does, he takes damage. And this Venom the Duck goes down in 55 seconds. So she's not the fastest highest damage output champion, but she is also very tanky, very safe, and quite versatile in her kit. Now, some of the other matchups here, again, I will be using a 4-star rank 3 against 6-star rank 4s primarily. Obviously, she has a phenomenal matchup against the Thing because she's buff immune. Being buff immune means that every time Man-Thing uses a special attack, she will be gaining poison charges, and that will just help me in this fight quite significantly. And here, I did not really want to push him to level 2, but fair enough. No harm, no foul. And her ability is basically perfectly counter Man-Thing. Man-Thing's not poison immune, so you can use the poisons to extend the duration of my taunts and my power stings. You have the class advantage, and on top of it all, you just stack up the power stings, shut down opponent's regen that he will be gaining later. Taunt makes sure that Man-Thing uses special attacks quite freely. There I eat 1 special attack, but even as a 4-star rank 3, we can see that you hardly take any damage. And life's quite good. Life's quite easy, and that Man-Thing is going down very steadily. At this point, I have pretty much my max ramp or close to it. I'm going to go for my level 2, and these are guaranteed crits, but obviously Man-Thing does reduce the damage there, but it's not the biggest deal in the world. I just basically want Man-Thing to use like 1 more special attack, and we should be pretty much fine. We can see that regen is pretty much shut down there. And come on, where are you at? There we go. That's 1 dead Man-Thing. Now, this fight against Absorbing Anne, obviously pretty much perfect too. Well, she's going to be very good against most Mystic champions, almost all of them. And namely also because she's buff immune, so you never need to worry about Mystic Dispersion. And then obviously her kit just fits perfectly to deal with a ton of Mystic champions, make sure they use their special attacks, shut down healing or whatever abilities they have. And one kind of like big important piece of advice that I have to give with using Cassie Lang is do trigger that poison as often as possible, and do try to dex as often as possible, or force opponent to basically miss with their special attack hits. Because having that poison active is a massive help when you want to watch the time, when you need to deal with the timers. It just gives you so much more leeway. It lets your power stings and taunts and everything else last much longer. Gives you much greater control of the fight. So in every single instance, you do want to activate those poisons as often as possible. Makes fight much easier. It also means that going up against poison immune champions can be a lot harder. Now, I have previously successfully done Thing fights with Cassie, and we can see that Cassie is going to do perfectly fine against Thing. She does have a kit for it because it's quite easy to make sure that you push Thing past 1 bar of power. It is also quite convenient that your damage type is power sting, so you do not hit too hard unless you use your level 2. which basically means that, you don't really need to worry about protection. Thing isn't poison immune, and you can deal with it quite easily. Here we can see me make a bit of a mistake, letting some of the powers things go. That's, unfortunate, but sometimes happens with Cassie. You kind of need to expect it. Not every fight is going to go perfect. But the reason why I wanted to include this fight is because I'm going to be able to demonstrate how she's currently bugged. So here I'm connecting my one heavy attack. I want to bait out a heavy attack from the thing. And I do. And here it goes fine. You can see it was okay. And very, very, very soon, you can see an opposite of that. And it is very inconsistent. You guys are definitely going to notice when it happens. So here's one heavy attack. Thing's about to take some damage here. So let's just make sure he's special sweet. He's at 42%. Fight's going pretty much perfect, right? Can use my level 1, push him closer to the second bar of power. Okay, so here at this point, I want to use my heavy, and I do, and he just randomly throws special attack. Again, so we can see that. Right. So thing uses his heavy, I counter with my heavy, and he randomly throws a special. And there will be more problems with Cassie Lang currently in the game, like her special one hits whiffing. That happens, unfortunately, too often too. And because of this, obviously, I completely screw up my rock stack management and I get KO'd. Fight was going very, very well until it wasn't. And again, it's such a silly little stupid thing. You can see, sweet, bait out a heavy attack, and he just specials in my face. So yeah, be careful of that if you use Cassie Lang right now. Obviously, then I can show more gameplay examples. She's great against Rintra as well. It's one of those matchups where you want to kind of test it and feel it, because you do want to ideally phase the last hits of Rintra's level 1, so you can gain more poison charges, so you can manage the fight better. Here, I think at this point I'm going to lose a lot of power things as well. Because I just kind of got too greedy. I wanted to build up too many poison charges. So that is why I give that advice. Activate that poison as frequently as possible. Do not try to build up to 6 charges and then activate it. If you have 2 charges, use it. If you have 3 charges, use it. Do not build up to 6 charges, because that poison makes all fights much easier to manage. But obviously, she does have a great Rintra matchup. Have done it in Battlegrounds as well. This time around, it kind of took a while, but normally it is a bit quicker. I wanted to show kind of like less than ideal matchup as well. So we have Hulkling. Hulkling obviously is poison immune. There isn't anything too specific for Cassie to, counter Hulkling, which he does relatively fine, because you can phase quite a lot of hits from that special attack as he gets closer to you. Obviously, you can't really use the poison because he's poison immune, but you can just force out special attacks from him. You can keep your taunt on the opponent, and sooner or later he will go down. Just make sure you stack up as many power things as you can. And again, this is a rank 3. Here I do make a mistake. I do get clapped a bit because I charged my heavy attack when I didn't have my pim particles. I think I didn't actually scope this video properly, but you definitely can do this matchup. It's just you do have harder time managing the powers things, because again, he is poison immune. So without that poison, you do need to be spamming your level 1s more often. You cannot really go to your level 2s as easily, and you need to make sure that you have more cooperative AI. That's kind of like the biggest difference. If opponent is poison immune, you really, really want to use your level 1s. If opponent is not poison immune, you can often pretty much skip the level 1s, especially if you have the Ant-Man relic that still gives you access to taunt. But yeah, she definitely can deal with Hulkling, for instance, relatively well. Again, haven't had a perfect fight, but given the fact that I'm using a 4-star rank 3 against 6-star rank 4 Hulkling, doing just fine. We have pretty much full ramp up here. Now he's going to use this special attack while Indestructible is active, so that kind of sucked. But I'm going to throw my level 1 here, make sure that Indestructible is just expired, and that's enough damage to take him down. This is one of my favorite matchups, though. And that is because Mojo has many hits in his special attack in quick succession. So you can basically get 6 of your poison charges in a single hit here, as we can see, and inflict a ton of power stings very, very quickly. So you can just dash back and start charging your heavy attack in the middle of this special attack and just gain a ton of charges. And that's kind of like one of the cooler things about Cassie Lang is because that heavy miss mechanic activates very quickly. So you can start using it in the middle of opponent's special attacks, for instance. It is, again, one of those things that does require practice, but this is a legitimate kind of strategy to either avoid taking damage or just completely capitalize on it, inflict more power stings on the opponent, and completely wreck them. So here we can see that this 4-star rank 3 is destroying that Mojo utterly and completely, and the entire fight takes 54 seconds or so. And then the final one, here I wanted to show the difference of the amount of damage an average 4-star would be taking. And Cassie is average stat-wise. But once you kind of ramp up, use that count, how tanky she becomes. So now at this point, I think I needed to edit this better. Yeah, here we go. Sorry, I needed to redo this fight. But the point is, I want to take a level 1 on block before he enters his overcharge mode. You're going to see that level 1 basically does 10% of my health as block damage. And that was before his overload mode activated, right? I took 10% of my health. Now I have taunt and 9 power stings, and he has overload mode, and it did like 1%. When you have taunt, when you have the power stings on the opponent, he becomes so tanky. Keep in mind that Punisher's attack is basically doubled to what it was at the beginning. So I would have presumably taken close to 20% of my health as damage in those matchups. Now I can easily just get by taking 1 or 2%. And that is obviously because of max inequity and a ton of debuffs and that taunt working in unison to significantly reduce any kind of like damage power opponents have. And that is even with, this double the attack that Punisher had initially. And obviously here again is a great example of basically completely shutting down the region, and life's good. So yeah, Cassie Lang in general, again, she's kind of sciencey version of Tigra. Not as fast, not as explosive. She's a ramp up and maintain, but playstyle is quite a bit of similar because you do phase, except you do need to kind of like measure when you can, when you can't do it, when you have enough fuel, when you don't. So she's the champion that definitely requires quite a bit of practice. Ultimately, though, I really do enjoy the champion. I'm super happy to get rank 4. And again, I just wish Kabam fixed her animations. So I hope this video was helpful to you guys. If it was, hit that like button, hit that sub button, hit all the good buttons, and I will catch you guys soon. Bye. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about